Welcome to the House of Legends podcast, where great women become exceptional. I am your host, Graciela, founder and CEO of the House of Legends by Graciela, a mindset coach and mother of 3 beautiful kids. My mission and passion is to provide you with the tools that will allow you to unlock and bring out the best version of yourself, which is the key to all change. Some of those tools are mindset, identity work, and emotional mastery. Not only that, but I will also bring you powerful conversations with legends like you, showcasing their journey, life work, and allowing us to learn from their experiences and insights. So don't miss an episode. Tune in each week to the House of Legends podcast and let's unlock the power of your own legend. Let's dive in today's episode. Welcome back to the House of Legends. Today we have a special and gorgeous guest, Ali Cates. She's an expert. She's a trauma recovery and nervous system regulation expert. And she's now joining the conversation here at the House of Legends. With that being said, Ali, if you can introduce yourself, let us know who you are and what got you to where you are right now.
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for letting me be here and bringing me on. My name is Ali Kate. So, like she said, I am a trauma recovery coach, somatic experience practitioner, and what I help primarily women do is move the emotional charge through their body because when we have been through trauma, it's actually our body that holds on to trauma, not our brains. So, that is kind of the quick and dirty of what I do. And what led me here was actually, so my husband, when I was 22, my husband and I lost 3 people in 9.5 months. And then
Mm,
we went on to lose 7 people in 2.5 years.
ah,
And the count just kept on going up and up from grief and loss. And the back-to-back deaths in 9.5 months really brought up this old childhood trauma that I had completely disassociated from. And I went into intense trauma recovery at the time. And I didn't think I had trauma. I just knew that I was so overwhelmed and my mental health was taking such a toll because on paper, everything looked perfect, right?
yeah.
Um, and so then, kind of like fast forward 3.5 years, I'm in intense trauma recovery. I'm going through, memories. I'm moving emotional charge out of the body and doing the body work piece of it. And let me just back up for a second because prior to that point at 22, I tried everything under the book. I tried CBT, EMDR, hypnotherapy, brain rewiring, like really went on a healing quest and nothing really
Mm,
seemed to move the needle until I was able to get back in my body and regulate my own nervous system. So that's
mm,
like at 22. And then fast forward 3.5 years, we're 3.5 weeks out from getting married, my husband and I get diagnosed with late stage Lyme and multiple autoimmune diseases. And I come back from our honeymoon and I sit in an IV room for 9.5 months, 3 to 4 times a week, 6 to 8 hours a day, getting pumped full of medicine through my port. It was like a dark night of the soul. It's kind of like a breaking down, ego death, whatever you want to call it. And because I was in this IV room, I had to quit my job at the time to actually focus on my health because it was so bad. And I listened to a lot of people because there's a lot of walks of life that come in through this IV room. And I was listening so much to people. And the resounding thought, and this was before COVID, right, was that people need a place to come and work through life's most difficult moments, right?
yeah.
And so it was kind of like in the IV room that I started to formulate on like, what would this look like? Would it be a retreat center? Would it be, bringing in different modalities for people to try on? Um, and so that's what it first kind of started out as. And I actually had a podcast because I could at least sit on the couch and like record people because I couldn't, be physically in person with people at the time. Um, and then COVID hit, and then I pivoted into coaching and becoming a somatic experience practitioner through Peter Levine's work and all these kinds of things around nervous system. But yeah, that's like my longer Reader's Digest version.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I would love to highlight a few parts, if you allow me. One of
Yeah.
the that you mentioned, especially for all the women, especially most of the listeners are entrepreneurs, and for experience, I'm telling you that we don't see this part. We
Mm,
most of us, when we are coming here as entrepreneurs, or we hire a coach, like you said, or we try like just mindset or other modalities. But when it comes to nervous system regulation, for me, was pretty new back in 2022. I didn't knew nothing about this, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing brought me to another that allowed me to attract the people that were able to help me in that specific
Mm-hmm.
area. But I would love for you if you can just go a little bit deeper. What is the difference? Because you mentioned getting into your body, and sometimes let me tell you, back then I was like getting into my body, like I
Mm-hmm.
was more like yeah, get what I need to do. So I
Yeah.
was doing that, and I'm telling you, even if we have if we know that something is still not clicking, it's like, well, getting into my body, what has that to do with business? What is that has to do with the way that I do feel? So if you can go a little bit deeper, what is the difference between rewiring your mind, mindset, even you mentioned hypnosis as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so none of these things like hypnosis and all of that stuff really worked for me. What worked for me was actually being able to like regulate my nervous system and move the emotional charge out of my body.
Mhm.
Because when you've been through trauma, right, all of these kinds of like typical things when we talk about trauma recovery, EMDR, hypnotherapy, they're still dealing with the brain.
Yeah.
And when you have been through trauma, your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, goes offline.
Mm,
So to have a modality that works with the prefrontal cortex, like it doesn't connect, right?
yeah.
And so that was a big piece of actually doing the somatic experiencing, doing the nervous system work. The myofascial release was huge for me. But how it relates to business is like, I think so much of us who are entrepreneurs, we have to just like be our own best friend and continue to have this self confidence and say, like, if you have a big vision in your life, like you're the person that has to believe in it the most, right?
Yeah.
And when you're in chronic fight or flight, or I think as entrepreneurs, you're in fight or flight a lot because you're making decisions from the hip. Something happens, right? Like you can be in fight or flight and it can actually become the mode that you're running in. And
Mm,
so for me, what has been so important, right? Because like there's been different levels of nervous system work that I've had to do, but is actually being an entrepreneur that's regulated because then I'm making more holistic decisions, right? Instead of if like a client's canceling on me and a team member's messaging me and then this person's canceling and then this has happened, like we can immediately go into this like reaction based mode, which can be a version of fight or flight, right?
correct.
And so what's helped so much is actually be able to like when you say get back into your body,
Yeah.
is as an entrepreneur, we're so focused on external things
Mhm.
that actually getting into your body is like slowing down, right? And feeling like, okay, I'm super anxious right now before I get on a call. Where do I feel that in my body? Right.
Mm, love it. Okay.
And it's like, okay, so you feel it in your stomach. Okay, then like, can you feel some place on your body that feels the opposite of that? Right.
Okay.
And just knowing that you can like have these similar feelings in your body but also like there's sometimes when we need to be in there's sometimes in life where like being in fight or flight is helpful, right? It's what
Yeah.
helps us
Right.
move
Yeah.
forward. It's what helps us like make these decisions, right? So I think when people talk about nervous system regulation, they're always like, oh, I want to be in the parasympathetic and I want to be super regulated all the time. And like, that's not life. And
Yeah.
anyone that tells you that that's what life is, like, they're delusional. But like, nervous system regulation is when you can go in and out of being super anxious or depressed, and you can like move a little bit easier through them, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yes. And I ask you this directly because like I mentioned to you, on my case back in 2022, I was experiencing the symptoms. I would say I wasn't like, let me just bring an example. Let's say
Yeah.
I was by that time I overbook, I will say. Like I was working with a lot of one-on-one clients and then a group and then master classes, and something inside me, I arrived to the point where I was not able, like really, I mean, to
Mhm.
even to have the green light on my face. I was like, something was just like, oh, I don't want it, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I have to push. And I got sick. I got
Mm.
sick back then, and that forced me to slow down. And right there, I was able to see like, what, this is not normal. This is not about
Yeah.
one mindset. This is what is going on. And like you mentioned, getting back and understanding what is going on inside. Why do I feel
Hmm.
like that way? And I love the fact that you mentioned what part of me feels that.
Mm. Well, I
My,
also think,
yeah,
yeah, I also think too is like there is this drive because I work with entrepreneurs as well, right? Or, people that are in kind of the space or in the spotlight. And there is a drive as an entrepreneur, like that gets you somewhere, right? So maybe it's like you need to prove to yourself that you're worth it and you can do this. Maybe there's like a, younger version of you that got bullied and is trying to prove to all those people that bullied you that you can make it and that you're worthy enough to be an entrepreneur and to help more people, right? But
yeah,
like that younger part of you is only going to get you so far, right? And that's typically when burnout happens, which is what you're talking about, where you're like, I'm booked and I'm selling out and I'm like in all the master classes and I'm doing all the things. And now I've hit this point where I'm like, I'm done, right?
yeah, what's
And
going
that's, yeah. And that's what's so interesting about like nervous system and business is that like you have to find that deeper why. Because if you're doing it for someone else, it's going to only get you to a point. If you're trying to prove someone wrong, if that like angsty teen version of you is trying to show someone that you're better, like that
yeah.
only gets you to a point, right?
Yeah, that's so true. And sometimes, like you mentioned, so we are operating under that identity, I call it identity, from the 16, 20-year-old, and we don't
Yeah.
even know. And you make it really, really smart here, asking ourselves why I'm doing this in the first place.
Hmm.
And if I do have the signals of like I start feeling in that way or another, and I feel it in my body, I have to slow down. But one of the things as an entrepreneur is slowing down. We have the two cultures, even the one that is like, hey, just lay back, just be in your feminine. That is another topic, but just slow down, just like listen to your body.
Yeah.
That's it. And the other one is like, no, you have to put 10,000 hours, right? You have to
Hmm.
push, you have to do the thing, you have to whatever things and so many routines. So it right here is when it comes to this doing this work, because when we do this work, we become mindful of what are the things, like you said, what are the things that feel right to me, what are the things that work for me, and I'm
Hmm.
not proving or I'm not trying to reach another place. I'm just doing this from a grounded version of me, right?
Yeah. And I think that there's always like, there's always the middle ground,
Yeah.
right? It's like sometimes you are in your feminine and sometimes you are in your masculine, and sometimes you're in the middle, you know?
Yeah,
I think like right now we're like so overwhelmed by all of these topics, especially on social media, that you're like, oh, you always feel like you're never doing it right,
Mm,
right? And
yes.
that's like part
I
of the
literally,
and that's like part of the nervous system work is actually feeling like, no, okay, for me and my body and where I'm at, I'm right where I need to be. And I have all the tools inside of me. And for people to actually feel that feeling in their body of safety and security can be one of the most terrifying things that they've ever felt because they're always looking externally
yeah,
for the validation, right?
that was so true. Yeah. And I would love for you, Ali, if you can extend a little bit in this topic, because like for me back then was, and I'm just bringing me just
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
or maybe someone can just relate. When I slowed down, I was releasing even weight. I was like, what's going on? Like, it was
Yeah.
just so much relaxation. When my mind was telling me just do more, this and that. But even if my mind was telling me that, I was not able. Like, I was just like, even the light was just like, I can't, right?
Yeah.
But when I started working on, like you said, doing the exercises, just sitting down, just like
Hmm.
doing nothing, in quote unquote nothing, because I was choosing to do something, just sitting down, right? But for the first time in a long time that I was remembering, I was feeling, like you said, safe. I was just feeling like this felt so good. So what was the other thing
Hmm.
that I was experiencing?
Yeah.
And right there, I got curious, and those are the things that sometimes with it, as an entrepreneurs, we don't give ourselves that grace of like, hey, I'm just gonna slow down, and how I feel,
Hmm.
check on me, how I feel, check how, just running a little kind of will say, and how do I feel? Because like I said, for me it was like, wow, this feels good. For the first time, I
Hmm.
don't feel in a hurry. I don't have to do things. And my system, it was like, this is kind of feels good, but it's like, no, 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 this is kind of not normal. So I
Yeah.
did have to choose to give myself grace. But if you can go a little bit deeper, what is the difference here, and how we do call those states? One is the
Mm.
fight and flight, but
Yep.
you, yeah,
Yeah. So This is really good. So I'm gonna give a description for all of my like visual learners of what it looks like when your body's in fight or flight, because you're talking about a couple really important topics around nervous system, which is we're constantly overriding our bodies because there's something happening that maybe we don't have the tools to work through or it feels scary, right? So when you are in fight or flight, this is what happens is that it's a circle, okay?
Okay.
So at the top, there's a trigger, then you go into fight or flight, then there's a discharge, and then you go into rest and digest, okay?
Okay.
So this gentleman who I became a somatic experience practitioner under Peter Levine, he studied animals out in the wild and he said, how come specifically prey are not constantly in fight or flight? Like how come they can be, chased and then go back into parasympathetic, right?
Yeah.
Which is where you heal. That's like the trendy kind of thing that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So let's imagine you're a bunny rabbit out in the wild and you're munching on some grass and then you hear like a branch break over your right hand shoulder and you look, that's the trigger, okay, at the top of the circle.
Okay.
You see a coyote, so you run. That's fight or flight, right? You're
Yeah.
leaving, you're flight. Then you find a safe spot and you discharge. So the bunny rabbit, without thinking about this, is either shaking, screaming, it's having some type of discharge. And then
Mhm.
it hops off, finds another safe space, and it rests. It sleeps, probably takes a little nap or just rests, right?
Got
And
it.
then it's completed this circle. It's called the stress response or the trauma cycle, right? And then its nervous system is regulated. It's not thinking about that coyote anymore because it doesn't have the trigger. So its body's completed this cycle, is what we call it.
The energy move.
Human, yeah, the humans go from being in trigger to fight or flight, trigger to fight or flight.
Never
And we
complete.
don't, right, we don't have that discharge. So
Mm.
then that charge gets stored in our body, right? And that charge is what most of us get addicted to, especially entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
because we're running on adrenaline. We're in this heightened state. We're in a high sympathetic charge, is what it's called. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's hard for especially entrepreneurs to have that discharge moment, which looks different for people, and then to go in that relaxed state, right? So sometimes a lot of people miss this part, the discharge, and they just go into resting. And
Okay.
then they still have anger, sadness, grief, and then they're just like, F this, I'm going to go back to being in a heightened space and have anxiety because that feels better, right?
Mm. Can you give us an example? What could be that you mentioned about the trigger and then flight or fight?
Yeah.
What it will be the discharge for
Yeah,
our
so the discharge looks different for people. And
yeah.
what's like the good and the bad of social media is like you see these people that are posting these things about how to move trauma out of your body. But typically it can look really subtle for some people and it can look bigger for others. You're having some type of shaking, um, whenever it looks different for clients, it's hard to say. Sometimes people will throw up, like that's how they're like actually discharging as they're having this big release because it's the trauma so overwhelming. So
Mhm.
it can look different for people. Maybe there's anger, they're screaming, they're yelling, like they're having this like either big emotional charge, or it can look as subtle that I've seen with clients as like their eyes are moving in one direction and then they move to like a different direction and they're able to see like to the right side where
Got
the
it.
right side was like blurry before, right? And so I say this with an asterisk is that it's really important to work with a practitioner when you're actually doing this because if you're using these tools and techniques that you're seeing on social media and you can re-traumatize yourself because if you have a big discharge and someone isn't there to help you, that can actually re-traumatize you. So I always say this as like a disclaimer
Yeah.
because it's so important in the space right now that you're seeing a lot of stuff like workouts and hip releases. And I'm like, what happens when they tap on that old charge that they've like, that old memory that they've shoved down for years, right?
That's true. Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned that because like especially right now on social media we have access to a lot of tools.
Everything. Yeah.
Uh, in artificial intelligence, I mean, you could put something and you have like the whole book, the whole thing.
Hmm.
But when it comes to the work, is like that's why we go to women like you. Like I cannot do it alone. Like even
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
the things right, it's like you said, we can even trauma put the trauma inside of us, and we don't even
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I would love also to ask you when there's all trauma, like
Hmm.
what is the approach if we, like you mentioned, maybe we got triggered, but if we remember something and we have that old trauma, and with old trauma I refer maybe this thing, the situation happened 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and I mentioned this with a purpose. Client, I'm not gonna mention the name. Actually, she was really like, she's a coach, and she was not making like at all. Like she was like having high months, and then after that, like dry spell, I will say. And
Hmm.
I asked her what's going on, and she said, and she was like, no, I'm doing the right things. And we got to the point of like, hey, I did invest a few years ago, like years ago. I think it was like 2020 something. And when I
She
entered,
didn't what?
she invested in a new coach,
Oh,
and she said,
oh.
because she was not in a good place, and she said,
Hmm.
well, this coach, she said that if it was like using those tricky, like fearful techniques, and she both on that, and she said
Hmm.
after being in that container, I was like, this is not the thing that I'm looking for, and I was trying to move myself out from there, and I found myself with a lot of debt,
Hmm.
and I was like, okay, so what are you thinking about that? It's like, well, and we, to make the story short, the narrative is like, I did invest in this lady, and she didn't give me what I wanted, or I was
Hmm.
the things that I was expecting. So I
Yeah.
don't want to be that coach that do those things to other clients. So that's why I'm
Mm.
overdoing, that's what I'm overdoing. And it's like, that doesn't make kind of any sense. And I think it was like a part like of trigger, like maybe she did
Mm.
absorb that. I'm not sure, right? But how do you could approach that scenario?
Yeah. So like if this was my client, I would one is like help her just drop into her body around like what that discomfort is, like
Mm,
when she got taken advantage of, right? Because here there's a what we call like a state, and I don't know this client at all, so I'm just going in from like what you're kind of telling me and what I've experienced with my own clients is at the bottom there's always at the root of something,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
and for this one it sounds like there's something around being taken advantage of that's triggering.
yeah.
So we have what's called a state specific trigger, which is like something in the present is triggering something from the past. And then
Mm,
she's reenacting it in the present and
yeah,
trying to work it out in the present. Okay.
got it.
So I would get curious about like what's the with her, right? If it was safe and she was willing to be like, hey, what's this thing about being taken advantage of? You know, and typically, from what I've experienced with clients, is there something around being taken advantage of maybe in childhood, some type of sexual assault can be here, right? Underneath this.
Yeah.
And that coach having that similar, like kind of taking advantage of feeling, that's how she felt in her body. Maybe that's not what the coach like was trying to do, but that's what she felt in her body is triggering that old wound. So then she's going into freeze and not able to like continue hitting high monthly income because her body's frozen and is like, this isn't safe to coach people. And, you know, it's old pain that's coming up.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. That is so deep. And I love the fact that you mentioned this, like it could be just we think that is a cause, or we have a thought and it goes way deeper.
Well, typically, like when someone's having that big of a response,
Yeah.
I am always like, you know, sometimes that's just what it is. Maybe it's like, oh, I feel like this person's really taking advantage of me. But then there's also like the money mindset around it. Like, okay, are you having a money mindset block, right? Like you invested in something, you didn't get something back, right? There's
Yeah.
always this like, to me, when someone's in that kind of what we call functional freeze space, there's always something deeper in your nervous system there. And it doesn't have to be a big T trauma, right? Like I mentioned, sexual trauma it
Could
doesn't have to be that big of a T. It can be a smaller T, and it's just it's it's staying in her nervous system like there's that coyote chasing her, right?
got it. Yeah. And what it will be the next step for her?
I would say working with someone that can help her with her nervous system.
Mm. And
Yeah.
when you said helping her with her nervous system, it's going, of course, going to the root, to like working one-on-one with her, or you name it, session wise. But after, let's say, you discover a situation or the client is aware of the situation, what are the first steps? I mean, I know for every single like client and case is totally different, but I would
Yeah.
love to know because in that way, some of the listeners can grasp something and maybe they've been experiencing that and they don't even know and they think that is the money mindset or they have to do more. Because
Mm,
in that case of on her, she was saying, I need to do more because I need to make sure that they
mm,
get what I'm promising. And even doing that, she was not getting traction.
hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would say this is like all case by case, right? So I would have to like talk to her and see what's going on and see if she's comfortable even having this conversation. But like, the biggest kind of next step for people when they're working with the nervous system is to find someone that they feel comfortable actually holding the safe space,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the times when we hire coaches and maybe we have some type of rupture, there needs to be room for what's called repair. So, like, we're in the space of like rupture and repair culture, right? And a lot of the times, especially on social media, especially with coaching, we're having a lot of ruptures and there isn't a lot of repair happening. So I
Yeah.
would say for this person or for anyone listening is like finding someone that you feel like you can have, safe space with and have a conversation with. And whether you find them on social media or, somewhere just being like, hey, can we have like a 30-minute, call just to see if we're a good fit? Because it sounds like for her, this client, she needs to feel safe and she's not feeling safe.
Got it. All right. I love that. I love that. And especially, one of the things that I admire so much about you, Ali, is that you're not like making the suggestions, you have to do this, this, and that. It's just like you're really mindful, you're really grounded. And that is one of the things that as a coach, I mean, we are looking for someone like you, someone that is
Thanks.
it's really clear, grounded, and actually let us know the things how they are, not like
Hmm.
just like sugarcoating or trying to impose one thing or another. And that is, I think, that is huge in this, especially in this industry.
Yeah. Well, and I think that like we hear so many things, we're bombarded with so much stuff on social media that
Yeah.
it's like, I'm fine saying like I don't have the answer for this one, and like it would have to be a case by case conversation with this individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That is amazing. All right. I will also know after COVID and you decide to launch your business.
Hmm.
What was I mean, what was the thought process behind that? Not going back to the old job and deciding, you know what, this has been working for me. I've been walking the path, and I know
Mm.
this will help not only other people, but just like worldwide, I would say.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I feel like I was so naive at the time, which I think is how like entrepreneurs start out.
Yeah.
But I think if someone told me how much energy and work it would be, I'd be like, yeah, that's okay. I'll go back to a 9 to 5. But like I would never change my life. But, at the time, it's like I didn't have another option because I was in an IV room. So my story's a little bit different. And then it wasn't like I had this side hustle and then I was making enough at the side hustle. And then I like switched jobs from the 9 to 5 to the side hustle, which is what you kind of hear a lot with solo entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs. But for me, it was like I was in this IV room and it was really dark. Like it was really sad. It was depressing. There was so much stuff coming up in my own life. And because we had lost these people, a lot of people so quickly, I had always thought like, I'm going to make a nonprofit when I'm like 45 and after I've done the corporate life and like a place that can help people with grief and loss and trauma and nervous system and all the stuff. But in that IV room, I really was like, why then? Why not now? Right. So at
Mm.
the time I was like 26 and I was like, okay, well, you can start small. You can just start by like building a brand. You can start by just like sharing what's going on in your life and how you're working through this healing, right? And that was right before COVID hit. So that was like September of 2019 was when I started this and I was like, I'm going to have a retreat, right? And then it just kind of grew. And then like I didn't do the retreat because of COVID. So then I went into getting my coaching certification and then my somatic experiencing certification. And it's just evolved and grown from there. But yeah, I don't have like a typical kind of like, oh, this is what happened. And then I switched here and It was
Mm,
just like, this is what, the universe, God, whoever you believe in, I think really like this was the moment where it was just like, you have to become this person because this is who you're meant to be here. And
mm,
so I like really took that to heart and was like, okay, like you're going through a health crisis, right? Like this is not fun. And, you know, how are you going to change your life and live differently out of this IV room?
mm. And thank you for sharing again that because it's so, so powerful. I mean, you're like you said, finding yourself in that situation and then deciding I'm gonna turn it around. And that
Thanks.
requires a lot of courage, bravery, and I mean, I cannot even imagine that because sometimes we don't even we are just here in the house or in our office and
Mhm.
we're like, oh, I cannot do this, I cannot do that, and you're in that place deciding, you
Mhm.
know what, I'm gonna do something greater. I'm gonna turn things.
Yeah,
That was really, really like powerful.
thank you.
And I'm so honored to have you here. Like that is
Thank
it's
you.
like mind blowing. I'm saying, and I saw your one of your highlights where you have your story, but what
Hmm.
you shared here is just like wow. And that is one of the things that I think I mentioned in I don't know like 10 minutes ago. Like we want to hire women like you that have walked the path. That's just not like oh yeah I'm reading this. You walk the path, and that
Hmm.
is
Thank you. Yeah, it's no easy path sometimes, but it's so worth it.
it is it is,
Mhm.
and you mentioned as well that as a coaches, entrepreneurs, or even if we don't have a business, even if we are just in
Just life.
life, right? This work is really important. Can you just give us, and by this point we already know the benefits, but can you give us more benefits? What are the things that really actually by doing the nervous system work and
Yeah.
regulating themselves, actually, even if we have kids, we can just
Yeah.
be calm and enter into the fight of like I do have three kids by the way, and they're
Oh
like
my
they
gosh.
control how they push my buttons
Oh,
and
I bet.
three different minds, and I was like, all right, have fun with one, right? But yeah, I think that I for me it was like huge difference just to
Mm.
be calm, relax, don't take
Yeah.
anything. But if you can mention
Yeah. I can give you some like case studies that I feel like are super
yeah.
helpful for people. I had one client that came to me that struggled with an eating disorder for a really long time. She was trying to get pregnant for like the last year and had done all of the things. She was like, this is the last thing on the list that I know that I can try. And 3 months, and she wasn't getting her period. She had lost her period for I think like 4 years. And a month and a half into working together, she got her period back. We were moving so much old charge. There was like some sexual trauma charge there. And we were moving so much. And then 4 months later, she got pregnant and she has like a beautiful baby boy now. So, and she had cystic fibrosis. No, she had, I never get this one right. It was like a stomach autoimmune. It wasn't cystic fibrosis. It was I forgot it. But that's one case study. Let's see. Another one was um gosh, there's been so many. My brain's like trying to be like, what do you think your client, the listeners would resonate with the most? I had another client that came to me that was in like the reality TV space and had a lot of media trauma. And she like couldn't even post on social media. She was just so overwhelmed by like people um just saying whatever they wanted to say. And I feel like as business owners or people that have a brand, like there gets to be this point where you're like, I don't know, can I be myself anymore on it? So we worked a lot around, the trauma of like her being on TV and like what that did to her nervous system. And now she's like totally just cruising and she's able to like post on social media and build her brand again. And she went from a place of like really having a lot of anxiety and anger towards this to feeling more embodied. Um, I've had clients that have had, endometriosis or other health conditions that we've gotten them able to like actually live a life again and be able to make their own decisions. Myself included, like if I didn't do the nervous system work and continue now to do the nervous system work, there's no way I could be running a business. Um, just because of like my own, background with my health. Like there's, yeah. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
Actually, thank you for sharing those examples because those, I mean, we are sometimes I'm really visual. So I was just like, while you were describing them, I was imagining that woman, that person, and I was like, wow, this is so clear. And one of the examples, the first one actually that you said about the losing the period, for me, that was
Mm,
that I used to be in bodybuilding. So we used to compete. And for me, it was like, screw it. I don't care about losing my period. But after that was a period of time where I was getting back my hormones and all that. And my body
hmm
was like, oh, like, I won't say no fight or flight, but it was just really accelerated. I was like, I was
Yeah.
to just be still, like not even closer to nothing. I was just like that. And I did have to work through that. And I think, like you said, nervous system is something that allows to be really who we are, who we want to
hmm
be, or the way that we want to operate. And this
Yeah.
applies to single area.
Yeah. Well, and like your nervous system is there to support you, right? I think so often we think that our nervous system or our bodies like hate us. And
Mm,
that's where like the like joining those two and actually feeling into your body, because so often we're like, oh my gosh, my body hates me because it's like putting on weight or it's losing weight or whatever the thing is, right? Or it's not getting pregnant or the hormones are up for my stomach or all of this stuff, right? But actually, your nervous system, when you can have that regulation and you can actually feel into your body, like that is what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be checking in with yourself, right? And that can, for people that have been in chronic fight or flight, can actually be terrifying to do, like literally terrifying to do, because you've lived so long the opposite way that you're like, no, 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 this is actually scary. Like living in my body is actually where the terror is, right?
yeah, and I think the magic occurs when we start, like you said, working, and then we feel good, and it's like this. It feels good. It
And
doesn't
then
feel
you're and then you start guessing, second guessing the good. You're like, no, 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 something's gonna happen. Shit's gonna hit the fan. The bear's gonna attack me. The tiger's gonna attack me, right? And you're like, oh yeah, now we're working this layer of your nervous system.
yeah, that's so, oh, that is so on point because
Hmm
it's not like this is feels too good. Something is gonna happen, like you said. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
and things like that. It's like, no, actually, that is coming from the past. It's not even here,
hmm
and it's actually acknowledge that in doing the work daily. If you can mention some examples, and actually, you mentioned some of them, one of them being checking with your body where you
hmm
feel that in what part, and if the other part feels in a different way, right?
Yep.
It will be a practice, something that and I know every single one of us were different, we're working different aspects, different backgrounds, but it will be something general that we can do on our daily basis to start, I would say, not regulating our nervous system, but start like that process, I would say.
Yeah. I would say the first thing is just acknowledging your emotions. That's like
Mhm.
number one. So there is even like a emotions wheel that you can look up on, if you just type in emotions wheel, and there's like the primary emotions in the middle, and then they kind of go out towards like the secondary and third emotions. So it's like if you're feeling sadness, like tease that out into like what you're feeling. Like,
Right.
are you feeling grief? Are you feeling loneliness, right? And then this is for like the pros here, but acknowledge like where that emotion lives in your body. So like sadness, does it live in your throat? Does it live in your head? Does it live in your hips? Like get clear on like where is that feeling in your body? And this is not easy. Like it takes clients time for this one, right? And that's when we're working the nervous system and regulating. But like those are the two big things I would say. And then the third thing that I would say is you know, if you want to tap into releasing any of that, you need three things when you're releasing trauma. This is a disclaimer though, right? Is because I just want to say you want to be in a supportive container, but you want sound, breath, and movement when you're releasing trauma, right? So this is for like pros here is like, getting up and like even just shaking your body out with like some sound and some breath, just to be like, okay, like this is like overriding your body to get that discharge, but it can be helpful for people that are stuck in freeze mode. It's just like shaking your hands out, right? Like giving some breath and some sound.
I love it. I do
Yeah.
love it. Yeah. Yes, that is so, so, so beautiful. And thank you for like mention the disclaimers because I, like I said to you, like that is one of the things that I really respect about you in your life work.
Thanks.
Really, I'm just I highlighted for the second or third time here. It's really important. I mean, there's so many people just like putting tips and tricks, I'm telling you. But when it comes to this work, we want to be with someone like you that right now I just feel really safe. This
Oh,
conversation is so beautiful because you're doing the work.
yeah. Well, I
So,
think that's like the biggest thing is that people want quick fixes.
mm,
Like we are programmed to get a quick fix. And right now, when with everything going viral, it's like because things are going viral, our like collective nervous system is in this space of like quick fixes, right? And when you're really doing the nervous system work, it takes time, especially if you have any sort of developmental or childhood wounding or trauma. Like that takes years, right? So if we're looking at TikTok or Instagram and doing these like myofascial releases or these like hip openers, like that isn't going to give you like sustainable change, right? And I don't think a lot of people want to hear that. They want to just be like, what's the quick thing that I can like fix my nervous system? And I'm like, nothing. Stay in fight or flight. You know what I mean? Like, because
that's true.
there
Yeah.
isn't a quick like I know that's like so sassy to say, but it's true because like there isn't a quick fix, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
actually getting into your body takes so much courage and time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I love that clarification because it applies for everything, even for a business, even for a weight release. Like in one day,
Hmm.
even if you do 24/7 exercise or you deprive yourself, it's not going to work out in that way.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, my like, I had this is a really interesting, like, just story around this is that I was at my acupuncturist and she was like, have you followed so and so? And I'm not going to say the name. And I'm like, no. And she's like, why? She does like stuff that you do. And I'm like, she doesn't. And then she's like, why not? I was like, okay. I was like, Erin, if someone came to you and said, you know what, I'm not going to come and do acupuncture. I have this acupuncture toolkit at home and I'm just going to needle myself and it'll be great. How would you feel? And she's like, oh, you're right. Like I would be like, wait, we're missing so much of like the work that happens in this space when you're doing acupuncture, or she's feeling your pulse and she's making sure that the points are in the right spot, right? Like,
it's a
you
lot of
know,
things.
it's a lot of like you have to have the, background in it. And so that's why she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're so right." I'm like, "Right." Like very
Yeah,
different. Yeah, it's like hiring, it's like being like, "I'm going to read a book and I'm going to, not hire a business coach and I'm just going to read a book." Well, it's like, yeah, that's going to help you, but at some point you probably need to hire a business coach, right? To get to the next level.
that is so clear. And might as well do it like when we know that is required. Why we're gonna prolong it? Like you said, what I'm gonna do this, and I love the example that you said. What I'm gonna put this uh retreat or helping people or when I'm 40 something, I can do it now. Like what I'm gonna
Hmm.
wait. And it's the same
Yeah.
thing for us. Why we want to wait if something is really important, right?
Yeah. Say it again.
Why we want to wait if something is really important, right? Like
Yeah.
we're in business for the long run. If we know that this is a really big part, not only for ourselves but also for our clients, might as well just start the process.
Exactly. Yeah. So true.
Yeah. Ali, I love this conversation. That was really helpful. I'm not saying that this was more like I will say mini mastermind here. Like chatting even this but with that being said, if you can share with us where we can find you
Hmm.
and what are the ways that we can work together.
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we got to connect. So everything on all platforms is allycates.co. So that's website, Instagram, TikTok. I'm most active on Instagram. You can shoot me a DM or a voice memo, and I'm happy to just chat with you guys in the DMs. And then the way that I work is right now with private one-on-one clients. So I'm doing, one-on-one clients in different coaching containers. So either a VIP day, a private retreat, or, I have 3, 6, and 1 year long programs that I also have as well with my one-on-one clients. And lastly, I have a self-paced online course. So if you're not ready to like invest to work one-on-one with me, I have a self-paced online course, which I would love to give your listeners like 20% off.
Oh, thank you. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do
I'm
you
gonna
want to
put
make a code?
we can make a code. Yeah.
Okay. What do you want the code to be?
We can put the House of Legends podcast. Mention that and
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Let's do that. We'll do the House of Legends 20.
yeah, awesome. Yeah, I love it. Love it. Thank you so much for the generosity, and I love as well. And I have to highlight it because sometimes, oh, that was nice that you have different entry points. You
Hmm.
want when we get to work with you or invest with you, you have like different points where either we can enter into the program or one-on-ones or the intensive, the VIPs, or even the
Hmm.
retreat. So there's
Yeah.
for every single one of us. I think when we invest in a coach, uh, one of the most important parts is also to feel safe. But what
Mm,
component that you bring in is amazing because it's having different entry levels that we get to feel safe even to invest.
thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah.
It's huge. All right, Ali, I'm gonna ask you a question that I always ask my guests. What is your superpower?
Oh, I think I'm a feeler. Like
Mm,
I really feel what's going on with people. And that is a blessing and a curse at the same time. I wouldn't say it's a curse, it's a blessing and like something that I have to watch, right? Because I can really feel when like people are going through stuff or when they're not being super genuine or when they're like trying to hold back or something and that's like a
yeah.
superpower. Yeah, I mean it's a superpower in coaching because I'll be like, what's going on here? And then they're like, shoot, you can see it, you know? So
Damn it.
yeah, I feel like that's my superpower. But it also can be a lot when I'm out in the world with a lot of people and I'm like tuning into everyone. And that's when I have to have my own boundaries. Like, no, this is not for tuning into everyone. But that's what I would say my superpower is.
I love that because I think like you mentioned, it's a double side.
Double-edged sword. Yeah, totally.
Yes, because right away you can feel like if there's anything like and for a small thing it's like, oh damn, yeah, you got me, damn. But
Hmm.
when we go out, this happened as well as me. Like when I go out, it's like, oh, it's too much. It's like
It's too
I have,
much.
I have to set out an intention even to go to the store, like, hey, it's gonna be this and that, because we can, like you said, we can if we feel so deeply for others, we can sometimes I grab emotions or feelings from other people. It's like, I
Mhm.
feel this way. Is this even mine? Oh no, it's not even,
Exactly. Yeah. I'm like, this is not mine. Yeah.
it's not even mine. I just put it out there. I was like, what the hell?
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much, Ali. This was a beautiful conversation. And all
Thank
of the
you.
listeners, thank you so much. I want to make sure that we're going to put all the details and the YouTube description and also on all the platforms. With that being said, have
Thank
a beautiful
you.
day. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for being here. Your presence is greatly appreciated and it truly means a lot to me. If you could support us by leaving a 5-star review, it will help us to connect with more extraordinary and influential women like you. With that being said, thanks once again, and let's look forward to an amazing and legendary week ahead.